Well, good morning. Welcome to the AgNow Roundup. My name is Dave Deacon. Get out of the wind here. Matt was right as usual. The cold weather is moving across the country. And we'll have a look at the next weather forecast coming up here in just a couple of minutes. But first I want to let you know that we're talking about insects this week and insect pressure in many of the crops that we talked about. We'll dive into that here in just a couple of minutes. But first, here's Matt Makens with the weather. I'm going to turn off the tractor. I'll be right back.
Welcome to the AgNow Weather Report. Matt Makens here. Watch the animation of storm flow for the next 10 days. So as we get into the 20th to the 27th or so, we're going to be watching for most of the moisture before that point to be over the west, and then watch later in the frames. Now we're into the 21st, 22nd, into the 23rd. Heavier rain will reform over the southern plains, the Mississippi Valley, and move out to the east. So a little bit of a break in the action early on over the next couple of days for the central and eastern areas. Meanwhile, the focus is the west, but don't be too impatient, because next week we're going to start to bring in that moisture again for the southern plains. So great news from a drought perspective for those counties, say central, south, and anywhere from Texas to Kansas and east. Let's take a look at that precip map now. Again, that goes through the 27th of January. There's the focus of early precip, the west. Some of these impressive totals: Seattle, Portland, on down toward the Sierras, the Central Valley, the coastal areas, anywhere from 7 to 10 to 10 to 15 total inches of water. A lot of valuable water. Look at those similar colors on the map here for the south. We're looking at 7 to 10 to 10 to 15 inches there across far southern Mississippi Delta from New Orleans to Houston. So very heavy rainfall in some cases, and that heavy plume stretches all the way up into the, at least the eastern fringes of the Corn Belt, if you will. So valuable moisture is on the way. A couple of gaps though, the upper Midwest and the high plains of Colorado into Kansas, Nebraska, and northern New Mexico. If you look at that in terms of snowfall, that was total precip, everything combined. Just looking at total snowfall, the central and northern Rockies are still doing quite well. A favorable snow pattern for them, great for water resources into the spring months. A little bit of a light snow covering some of the northern plains, and then you get into the lake effect snows out across the east. But as far as cold, with this next round of rain to produce snowfall, say in Oklahoma or the panhandle of Texas, right now it looks like that'll kind of hit the northern panhandle of both Texas and also the panhandle of Oklahoma. But as far as stretching that cold out any farther down to the south, doesn't look as likely this next go round. What's the outlook like beyond this? So now we're looking at late January, so basically the 27th, going into the first week of February. Moisture will still favor the south. This time we'll include New Mexico and Arizona, still keeping Texas in that favorable pattern, and the southeast. Drier areas will in turn be the Great Lakes stretching on down toward Memphis or so, with kind of neutral or equal chances, if you will, for everyone else. What about temperatures to wrap up? We're going to be warm here across the west. A ridge comes in. It's going to be a powerful one, a strong one that diminishes the chances for that precip for the northern plains and Colorado, and it brings in a boost to temperatures. So a much warmer start to February, and that cold weather we have now, it gets pushed off to the east. So all that cold we have now stays over the eastern areas, giving them below average conditions to wrap up January and start February. So that's a quick recap of the weather going on. Really the focus for me and from the ag world is going to be on that moisture down across the south. Do we really reach those high potentials there in Texas and Louisiana? We'll have more on that wet system and potential cold outbreaks too on the next AgNow Weather Report.
Well, thank you so much, Matt. I guess agriculture and cold weather just go hand in hand this time of year. Last week on the AgNow Roundup, we took a look at how crop diseases were impacting the 23 crop and how some of those lessons in that crop could be applied to the 24 crop. This week, we're taking a look at insect pressures from 23 and some of the lessons that were learned that could help growers in the 24 season. And we're kicking things off with canola.
The most important and the most serious issue that we face in canola year after year is canola flea beetles. And this is the early season pests, like right as soon as the seed kind of emerges from the seedling emerges from the ground, the flea beetles are ready to pounce upon on the cartledons, and they devour them. So we have a very serious problem with those flea beetles. And it's not just us, like, the country north of us, Canada, has been dealing with this issue a lot. And I think that's where they kind of moved into our area, as they find food, they kind of spread their distribution. So we've had this issue so long, and it's becoming worse each year, because it's like um, ample food everywhere, and like it keeps those generations continue every year after year after year. So that's a very serious issue for us early in the season, and we've been dealing with it. We are actually fighting a battle against it every year. But later, like as you move into the flowering and pod development, we have this migratory pest issue, the diamond backmoth issue. So that is a migratory insect which comes from south. Obviously, it doesn't overwinter in North Dakota. But so the migratory pest issues are like, when conditions are favorable and when the thunderstorms happen, like early part of the crop season, that's when these moths fly in, and then they go through a couple of generations during the season and cause damage.
When it does come to combating the insect issues, what do you recommend for producers, not only in North Dakota, but other folks that may have the flea and the moth issues across the United States?
So for the flea beetles, our primary method of dealing with this insect is seed treatments. So we rely heavily on seed treatments, and I don't think any field in our area that is planted to canola doesn't go in without the seed treatment, because that's a must. That's a primary tool of protection for these seedlings. And we have different groups of chemicals that are available. We have the neonics, and there are two relatively new groups like diamides and butanolides that are available. So over the years, like for the first chemicals that we have relied heavily were neonics, and so we've been using them for almost a decade, and that kind of put so much pressure on that group of insecticides that they kind of like now their effectiveness is kind of, the insects are kind of more tolerating those neonics, and they are not as effective as they used to be. But we have these newer modes of actions, and so seed treatments are our primary mode of defense. You can say, like, okay, sometimes early planting doesn't go well with, because that coincides well with the peak of beetle emergences. So we say, like, okay, don't go for early planting, like late, kind of hold on, and delay your planting, and that will help you avoid some pressure. So that's one of the tactics, but I think that is not working any longer in our area, because we have so many beetles. But still, in areas that are new, and like where a few acres, and you don't have that much pressure of flea beetles, delayed planting will certainly help.
Whenever it comes to soybeans this year, you mentioned the drought, but were there other issues facing this crop in the realm of disease or insect pressure?
Yeah, that's a great question. And actually, we had some insect problems here and there. If we take a look at some of our other summer crops, they had quite a bit of pest pressures. Some disease pressure kind of set in. Soybean actually didn't have that bad of an issue. We didn't see our major pest that we saw throughout the summer was chinch bugs and our corn and our sorghum system. chinch bugs aren't as negative towards soybean. We have seen them be an issue really early in soybean systems where the bugs just kind of overwhelm a small seedling. But once the soybean plant kind of gets up and starts developing, we don't see them as impactful as we do in corn, but especially grain sorghum systems. So we were relatively low on stink bug activity. We did have some across the state, but they were relatively low, pretty low on podworm. We did have some grasshoppers come in. I mean, a hot and dry year, we always talk about grasshoppers in Oklahoma, and we did get some foliar feeding, but we did have enough kind of pasture around that was being rehabilitated that a lot of times the grasshoppers stuck into that area. And so pest pressure was not nearly as bad as it could be or it has been in recent years. It's really that heat and the dryness that got to us this year.
What kind of insect and disease pressures do we look for whenever we're growing sugar beets?
Yeah. So let's start with insects, and there's really two that stand out. So in some parts of our sugar beet growing region, we have an insect called the sugar beet root maggot. The root maggot. So it overwinters. It's a fly that overwinters as a larva in the soil, and in the spring, these insects are feeding on the root of the sugar beet. They're kind of gnawing away at the root of the developing sugar beet. And unfortunately, the beet at that stage is extremely tender, and that causes a loss of stand if we don't manage it correctly. The other insect is a foliar insect that we have in some areas. It's a plant bug. I can't think of the name right offhand, Dave, but it's a plant bug style insect that affects the foliage of the plant, and sometimes it causes a disease in the foliage itself.
Do you see any insect pressure with the crops? Any other aside from weed pressure in the rice crop?
You know, we're super fortunate here in California. We have very little disease and insect pressure, given our climate. I will say that armyworms can be a problem in some years. It wasn't a problem this year. We have tadpole shrimp in these water-seeded systems that will eat the young roots of emerging rice roots as they're emerging in the water. So tadpole shrimp can be a problem, and seed midge could be a problem on the insect side.
Well, thank you so much for joining us this week on the AgNow Roundup. We hope that you found the information about insects helpful, and it will help you with making some decisions when it comes to the 2024 crop. If you'd like to learn more about what we talked about on this episode, head over to our website, agnowtv.com, and while you're there, check out our social media, sign up for the email, and of course, you can download the AgNow TV app. We have links to both the Google and the iTunes accounts on there, so again, check that out at agnowtv.com. From our farm to your farm, I'm Dave Deacon for AgNow.